Welcome to the meeting of the Audit and Risk Subcommittee. And we got any apologies? Got Murray Lemon, which is why I'm sitting in the chair today. Any other apologies? Well, Councillor, anyone heard from Councillor Hassan? An apology or? Yeah. Does someone want to move the apologies? Yes, Councillor Hassan, Ipihar. Seconder, Mayor Broughton, you're up, Bob?
Yep.
Okay, so any conflicts of interest? Anyone wants to declare that's not already on the conflict of interest register? No. The next is matters for investigations. Go to that table. Court dates. So we've got this risk appetite workshop.
That's been completed. It needs to be taken off.
Yeah. So put a line through that. We've got the risk register report today, and that's on our agenda. And the next one's for it being on the December meeting as well. So there's no issues with that. We start with the order of business, which is the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that?
I've just got a slight change, which I emailed through to management just around the
Yep, that's good.
interest paragraph.
Which is on which page?
11.
Page 11. Yep.
So it's just a tweak around, I think the comment was made, it's around 90% of the debt rather than 90% of the year. So maybe just go back and have a look at that paragraph, because I think it's worded in the minutes that I was questioning the confidence or comfort of putting away debt, 90% of the debt, but the way it's been written is 90% of the year. So it's just a couple of words need to be changed to make sure that's accurate.
So it should read, that's the third paragraph, second last line, it should read, for example, 70 to 90% of debt, perhaps, rather than debt per year. Is that right?
Yeah.
90% of the year.
Earlier in the paragraph as well.
Yeah.
I think one of it's right, so I think it's the earlier part.
Yeah.
Can I maybe get you to do some work, if you just do those changes through to the to our minute secretary, and to make sure that's accurate put in. So Councillor Langford's just, so can I have you mover for the minutes with those changes? Good. Mayor Broughton and seconded Shane, Councillor Ipihar. So all in favour, say aye. Any against? No, carried. So item number 2, the monthly report for the Audit and Risk Subcommittee from the chair. Unfortunately, I don't have a report, and so that item will just stay on the table. We'll move on to the next item. So Group Manager, Environmental and Regulatory Services, Mr. Harris, up to the table.
Chair,
Good morning.
So I have the risk management discussion on a regular basis to this committee.
So you have in front of you the risk management report and the register that's been updated. This was actually originally due to go to the October Audit and Risk Subcommittee meeting. It was pulled from there, so it's arrived today. There have been a lot of changes. Some of the changes have been made just to the risk level, the likelihood of some risks materialising, because the Selwyn economy has proved to be a bit more resilient than perhaps we had thought post-COVID. So some of the risks have been altered just to reflect that the risks to income and reduced population have not occurred. And if anything, they seem to be going in the other direction, which is a good thing. So there's just been some tinkering around some of those. Welcome some comments. The other comment I might make, and I think I alluded to it in the report, is that we're just having a look at the risk register in terms of how it's resourced, how it sits, and how it is perhaps more successfully embedded within the in the council's everyday operations. And so I've been talking with Kelvin about how that might happen, and we're doing the operational strategy, which we'll hear about in more detail, I'm sure, in the near future, and that will be one of the subjects of that strategy in terms of how we're looking at the risk register. So this risk register is now split into three parts: as the governance part, an operational part, and a COVID part. I think it's a wee bit clunky, really, and perhaps we could pull those together in a bit more an efficient way. It also only highlights a fairly high level of risks, and there's a whole lot of other risks underlying that. I don't think they particularly are welded together across council, and I think there should be a bit more, I guess, buy-in across the council from almost the culture of risk isn't quite as well developed as perhaps it should do. This is a good start. I think we probably need to keep working on it, which I intend to do with Kelvin. Maybe it needs a bit more of a dedicated resource. So there's some of the options we're looking at currently. I know that the subcommittee had a workshop on risk appetite. I wasn't there, and I'd be interested in any comments about how that went and if there's any outcomes from that workshop that perhaps I could take on board in terms of this risk register.
Yeah, I think, Tim, we've had a quick discussion on this previously as well. I think the risk appetite workshop was good. It gave the councillors a good opportunity to think a little bit differently about risks and using the categories that we have within the risk register. That I think Tim will incorporate into the risk framework, well, into the risk register. And as Tim was saying there about thinking about how we position the risk, we're working on that, but also the reporting, as we discussed at that workshop, will focus on the 3 risk types and bring those back in the report so we can have a detailed look at each of those with the focus on the real big risks and have a little bit more of a deep dive into those at meetings.
So look, have further comments or questions?
It's me. Morena. Yeah, Morena, thank you for the risk register. As I think I've said previously, that it's a very good foundation document. So it's got the right bones and structure. So as we've discussed earlier, the next steps is just to have someone challenge you on the quality of those risks and the ratings, because I won't go into sort of any specific detail here, but when I review the actual ratings of every single risk, I go, oh, that one's a high. Is that one really a high? So you kind of need someone maybe independent to come in and challenge you, step back and say, let's have a look at their ratings here and compare how you've rated them. And I think I've used the health and safety one as an example, and you've rated that here, but you've rated, to just have someone that can come in and challenge you on the quality of those risks. But as I say, the great first steps are there with the structure, and that's the hard bit. The other thing, when you do get round to putting some more guest time and resource into this, is maybe updating your framework to the latest ISO 31000 standard, which is actually 2018. So I'm not saying that to be pedantic, because there's actually quite a key difference between the earlier version and this version. And the latest changes are around embedding risk management into the organisation. There's actually two other parts. You've got the picture and the framework, but that's only one part now. There's two other parts which talks about embedding it into the organisation and about strategy. So I think if you refresh your framework and then look at your whole risk output, it will help you drive really good risk management practices through the organisation. So, and then once you've updated that policy and framework, I don't think we need to see it again as a committee, maybe once a year or however often it's renewed. But as far as kind of saving reading material, we don't need to see the policy or the framework again once you've updated it. We just need to see the risk content. So yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you for those comments. Yes, those New Zealand Standard just arrived in my inbox last week, and I'm aware of them, but I've yet to dive into them and see how we can transfer them into this framework. But I will do that, and thank you for that.
Yeah, Tim, you asked about the risk appetites, and in the workshop, I think it was a really good exercise to go through and understand from the subcommittee's point of view where the appetite's at. But there's some discussion about that needing to be a full council kind of discussion rather than just from us. So I think it's our intention that there'll be a council workshop running through the same sort of exercise to give that clarity to yourself and staff around where we sit around this appetite going forward.
Okay, so what we could do is just step through the pages that there are changes and that the committee is happy with those. So you're happy with that, Tim, to start? So the first change is on page 27, just making a change there. Is there anyone got questions or anything like that? No. Go through to 28. Just stop me if there's anyone who wants to add something. 30. Now we're on to the register itself. It's with changes on, well, it's page 33. Any comments? No. 34. 35. Nothing on 36 or 37. 38.
Yes.
Yes.
Morning, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Tim, for your report. I just would like to know a question where footpaths and roadings sit in terms of risk on the risk register. Would it be in infrastructure?
Well, in terms of what sort of risk, in terms of people tripping up, or
Yes.
it could probably fall in a number of different categories here, from reputational down to infrastructure.
Yes.
So this is one of the issues, that these are very high level risks, and there's a whole myriad of different ways that those risks can manifest themselves, and it's very difficult to sort of capture those. So this sets a framework, and it needs to then filter down through the organisation. But so, yeah, so it could be an infrastructure failure. It could be in a reputational risk if someone does have an accident on a footpath. So it would probably fit a number of different categories. Yeah.
So I guess my question is, if that was to happen, what are we doing to mitigate that risk, keep ahead of it, and in terms of maintenance, how can we identify it first and then mitigate that risk into the future?
Yeah, then it would. Yeah, again, this would filter down to the individual risk assessments of particular teams and projects, and I would imagine that they would be aware of those risks and will have maintenance schedules to address them. But they're probably not couched in specific risk management terms. That is more of a sort of, I would imagine, a maintenance type of approach.
Okay.
So this is one of the issues I think we need to grapple with in terms of how risk is viewed across council. This sets a framework. I don't believe it's probably consistently applied across council in terms of every project or every team having their own sort of risk that then feeds into this. So just in terms of how I developed this, it's circulated to the ELT before it comes here, and they go away and have a look, and Murray's probably one of the most active in terms of giving some updates. Murray, you've got any comments?
Yeah, it'd be fair to say we have most of our maintenance programs across all assets are designed to mitigate risk. So you obviously have to keep a level of service. All assets will deteriorate over time, and the intervention programs to upgrade and update those assets is based on a level of service, the affordability and ability of the program. So, and then you get to the point of the whole issue with what happens if someone has a accident or a crash on a council asset. The New Zealand ACC process, so basically said that people have an accident, they are covered by the ACC process and there's no litigation against council. So that's different in jurisdictions overseas where they are a wee bit more aggressive around issues. So if you know something is at fault and don't do anything about it, then overseas jurisdictions can be quite litigious. And our respect is about doing the best with what you've got for all of your ratepayers and customers. So I don't know if that's the way about saying it, but the issue is probably not diving into too much detail.
Yep.
And ensuring overall that you are attempting to put your efforts and your finances, constrained as they are, into the most obvious issues.
I guess then in terms of a risk register, how do we assess that as the asset deteriorates that the risk rises, and where does that sweet spot hit, and where do we, and I guess possibly...
I think, Shane, that what we need to think about there, that's some of your risk management plans. No, not your risk management plans, but your asset management plans. It's that you're assessing the risk of asset failure and making sure that you're doing the right maintenance at the right time. I think this risk register here is about council operations as opposed to risk to general public safety on tripping on a pothole on a footpath or a road, where your risk register would become unmanageable if you're taking in all those risks. So the key thing here is making sure that this couples with their asset management plans and their asset management philosophies to ensure that we're mitigating those safety risks from an asset deterioration or failure. But here is really thinking about our operations.
I just add to that you do basically condition assessment work all the time, and you'll basically report that through your performance measures through your annual report and how things are tracking versus your level of service.
Thank you. That was a good question for that discussion. Thank you, Shane. So we'll just keep heading on. So that was 39. 40. Anyone got any questions on that? Comments? 41. 42. 43. And that's it. So someone want to move that we accept that report? Ian Broughton, any seconder? Thank you, Bob. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carries. So on to the next is again. So the business continuity response report.
Thank you. This is another relatively short report, so I'll just make a few comments and speak to it. As I've mentioned before to this subcommittee, the business continuity plan was just being developed and rolled out as COVID came upon us, so it was quite timely in a way. Having said that, it soon became very, very clear that the business continuity plan was really designed for those sort of disruptions that would last perhaps a week or a few days to a week, not for a pandemic which saw a complete disruption to council services for a number of months rather than days. And it was a completely different type of disruption to our business. However, the business continuity plan did provide a bit of a framework for us to react to, and it was very useful in that regard. Since then, I've been getting a bit of thinking about how we might change the business continuity to perhaps be a bit more, I guess, agile in the face of these unexpected disruptions, because by very nature, things happen that you least expect them, and it's difficult to have a document that goes into a lot of details like this one that is able to, cover all sorts of circumstances. So we're two things. One, we're going to be running another business continuity exercise early in the new year. And so we're just getting our heads around what that might look like. But it won't be a pandemic type of exercise. It'll be just like a fire or maybe some sort of outage to our IT system, cyber attack or something like that. So we'll refine business continuity in the light of that exercise. Just thinking about the pandemic and how we sort of factor that into our business continuity response. And I'm thinking of developing perhaps a overlaid pandemic type of approach or work at home type of situation, which would be a lot more high level with some principles. We've gathered a lot of information, a lot of experiences from the COVID situation. We've gathered a lot of data. We've developed a flexible working home framework, which we're rolling out quite successfully across council. And we've took a lot of learnings in terms of, I guess, understanding how people are able to work at home and what they need to be able to do that successfully. So I'm thinking about packaging that together into a area that might live on the internet somewhere, along with our business continuity plans. That will then perhaps provide a bit of a framework for a future pandemic experience or something of that sort of nature where people are actually disrupted in a significant way for a lengthy period of time, and that it's not just an isolated event, it's a nationwide type of event. So that's what I'm planning to do, and that coupled with the exercise in March, we'll see some modifications to this business continuity plan, which I'll happy to share in the new year at some stage. Anyway, happy to take questions or comments.
Sam?
Yeah, I just want to, Madam Chair, it's just a good response, I think, to not get too specific, as you've said. We're never quite sure what the next issue that we're going to face is going to be. And the things that you've highlighted around the use of technology, flexible working hours, people who work remotely, but still stay connected to the team, and having those sort of practices, not just ready for the one-off, but actually a part of our organisation, I think sets us up well for that. And I guess that's also good, and you've mentioned the well-being of staff and the flexibility for people to be able to manage family and the professional and personal life around getting the best out of them while they're doing work, regardless of where their work is also good for our organisation in the intermediate term before we need to respond to anything in particular that might cause disruption. So I guess it's all just helping actually create a more stable organisation that's able to be more resilient to whatever the challenge that gets thrown at us. So thank you for your time.
Elisa?
Yes, great work. We've seen earlier drafts of this document, so huge quantum of work that's gone into it. I'm not sure if I mentioned this previously, but the BRT team, I noticed that we make reference to that team will be determined at the time as needed. So I just had a question around, and it probably more relates to an emergency response or disaster recovery. But is it appropriate, given that if those team members need to be trained, or if we've identified that they're the right team members? I just wanted to get the understanding of how that team will be determined when we need to.
It's a good question. The business, so often with the business continuity response, there will be a parallel civil response, and obviously the council's got obligations in the civil defence area. So it needs to, in my view, it needs to be fairly fluid, as we don't know who's going to be dragged into the civil defence response. So therefore, we need to be reasonably flexible in terms of the business response team. And in terms of training, the exercise will help with that. In terms of what we do is we have a exercise, obviously get a business continuity team together, and then we go inside and just go through the exercise of responding over a couple of hours about how that would work. I don't think it really answers your question.
No, just something to think about, really. Like, I have been part of an emergency response plan for central government for emergencies and disasters, and I've been on 2-day civil defence courses. They're quite intense, where you actually get given a role, and my role was a planner. And when you ran through those mock scenarios, there were backups. So I was sort of primary or a team leader, and then there were 2 people that were my backup. So the right people were being trained, I guess, so that to respond to that. So I mean, that's probably more in a disaster or an emergency scenario as opposed to business continuity.
So there will be a civil defence response team, which is quite different from the business continuity response team here. So that there's more formal training for that, I suppose. And there will be some training given to the business response team in terms of keeping council's essential services running, which is quite separate from a civil defence, which is more outward looking. This is inward looking. In terms of having the right people there, sometimes I think it might be the case of whoever's there might be the right person, given that people will be dragged into civil defence. There may be some sort of disruption that a particular team needs to actually be doing something else rather than being part of the response team, and maybe that the manager of, say, the IT team needs to actually be working on an IT problem rather than being part of the overall response. So it's a little bit difficult in terms of identifying particular roles attached to people. It's more around who's not preoccupied or busy with some other aspect of the disruption and is able to participate. To that end, we're trying to drag in a bigger pool as possible into the training, so everyone's got some idea about what to do and how it's going to run. One of the big things for the training is and it's very difficult to actually drill down exactly what we're going to do. It starts getting people into that mindset about what are the essential things we need to get done in terms of a business response, and it gets people thinking about IT stuff. It gets people thinking about, we've got laptops we actually need to take them home because there could be some disruption, and we're out of the buildings and all our gears inside. So it's those general sort of learnings, I think, that's quite important. And it is difficult because every disruption is going to be different with different characteristics and different people involved.
That's good. It's an interesting point, Annalise, because what you're referring to was the SIMS structure. And SIMS is probably something worth here because there'll be situations where civil defence won't be involved. So if there's a fire in this building, it's not a civil defence matter. So we'd need to, and it's not the initial business response of getting laptops out to people, but it's that response on the ground of coordinating what needs to happen. And I think when we do run the event, we should have some sort of feedback into the council, because if it was an event where, if it was a terrible situation, if someone lost a life or something occurred there needs to be the right communication and discussions with council at the same time. So incorporating them into an event is useful.
Just on to that point, sorry, Madam Chair, I'm quite happy to share what the scenario will be perhaps at some point before we actually get into that scenario, to get some feedback about what we're doing. And I think that feedback loop with the councillors is important. If it's not there, I think there is some sort of feedback loop there. So I'm quite happy to share. We're just still developing the scenario. We're thinking about a cyber outage. I just got an email today saying that could be a little too disruptive, because it would actually mean we might have to actually do some disruption to get to where we want to go. So still playing around with that.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I don't think it'll be too disruptive to actually planning for something that's going to disrupt us. We don't get to control the level of disruption. Just wanted to highlight what Kelvin has said, and I guess the difference of what we might be able to learn from the civil defence structure itself. And as you've said, Annalisa, there's planners, and we've got welfare teams, we've got response teams, and they're all well set up, and we've got some people internally who do that stuff. We've also got a whole group of volunteers that meet and train really regularly. So kind of learning from that to be able to be really inside the building for whatever needs to happen. Well, not inside the building, but inside our organisation. There might be some key takeaways from what's already a successful structure. Without wanting to overcomplicate as well, I think that there's a balance here to having people that are really responsive and can you know, at the drop of a hat, are resourceful enough to be able to change roles and pick up whatever needs to happen, rather than having a set plan.
Thank you. There's nothing else you wanted to add on that, Tim? So before us now are those recommendations. So endorse the updated business response plan, and B, notes the update on the work program to further develop the business response plan. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Sam. And you want to second that, Annalisa? All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So on to our next item. Thank you, Tim, for that. And it's Craig Robinson with the Major Projects Financial Report.
Just as Craig's coming up, it's a fairly brief report. There's not a lot in it. Craig just run through the highlights, but really the main thing was the looking at the facade at Tiara Tia, which was discussed at the last council meeting.
Thank you. Good morning. As Calvin said, there's not a lot to discuss. I took note of the fact that in the minutes of the last meeting, a lot of these reports are repetition. And I guess from a project's point of view, if it's repetitious, that the projects are proceeding as they have been planned. And in this case, you can see from the first graph on page 138, we are going as per the contractor's cash flows, albeit well behind where we thought we were going to be at the same time in the LTP, which is a bit of a shame, but we are progressing on that front. Indoor courts facility, I have taken a punt here in my projections and saying it's going to finish early. Yeah, it's they're progressing very well. In fact, to finish later than what we think it was, I can't see how the cash flow would work. So I've put in where I think it's going to be. John has not seen this, so don't tell him. But that's the indoor courts is a good news story. So yeah, it's progressing. SAC extension, it's fine. Yeah, it's going okay. We at the stage where the structure of the whole body of the place is being put together. The glue lamp beams are going in. They are completing their side of it as per the cash flow. It's going to finish probably the maintenance update of the administration section probably will go through until November, but the main body of the pool will be open in time for the summer. So that's good. Happy to take questions on this now if someone wants to question anything.
Has there anyone got any questions on what we've covered up until now?
Okay.
Just on SAC, are we doing the best we can for the changing rooms at the moment? I'm getting quite a lot of complaints about it's quite difficult to get changed. So are we doing?
I believe we are in the cost constraints that we've got because they brought in more Portacom changing rooms than they had originally budgeted to cater for it, because we did go into an accelerated program. So that required a lot of changes in the way things were done. I think there's a pinch point here for that sort of thing, but the quicker we can get that finished, the better.
Any other questions? No. Continue. Thanks.
Tiara, as Calvin alluded to, the only issue that's going on there is the issue with the facade. There is a report, I checked with Joanne this morning, the report, it will be received later this week. That will be coming to the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting, but the cost side of it is yet to be determined. There's that, plus the fact who is going to be paying for it, because there are design issues, there are construction issues, and staff are very aware that the onus is not going to be on the council. It's got to be on either the design people, the architects, or the construction side. So that is still to be resolved, and I haven't seen the report yet, so I don't know what's actually in that. But the actual construction of Tiara Tia is going fine.
Just on the facade cost, I know you said you haven't got a understanding of the quantum of cost yet, but do you understand whether the cost is going to be related to redesign, materials, and I guess extension of time?
Correct.
Is it going to be
Yeah.
3 buckets of extra cost?
Yes, it's got to be completely analysed because that's the only way you can actually apportion the cost. Yeah, so we're working on that.
So when they redesign, it's highly likely that the materials will be
Yes.
more expensive this year.
So you've got, then the contractor says, well, we've got to do more work, so there's extensions of time on that. So everybody will be jockeying for position there. So we need to understand entirely where the costs are and the cost line. Yes.
Certain value engineering.
Yeah, it'd be nice. I've just on the roading and infrastructure, that project is finished. And I've left it in here because we have agreed the COVID claim, which was substantially below what they originally claimed. So that's a good news story. And in actual fact, when you look at the expenditure to date, aside from any minor defects which may be added to this, we're actually only $30,000 over their tender price. And reanalyzing that, they had a vast amount put in for power. And it just never came to that. So by good luck, we've actually achieved a budget price, including $224,000 of COVID costs. So it's a good result. The Rolleston Town Square side of things, a new lead design developer is being considered. But the risks on this are increased costs due to the design. We've already paid for design, but new costs will come into this. So we'll have to be watching that whole side of things very carefully. Same with the retail. There's the hearing for the town centre is to be held in November. They're actually putting a resource consents for the retail parking will be submitted in November. So that's watch the space. The recovery park, another good news story that's actually come in under budget. It's complete. I've left a little bit of cost that may come in that we don't know about, but the whole project is substantially complete. So that's very good. Lincoln Reservoir is just progressing with the base walls and floor are complete. Pump station and treatment buildings floor, and they're all complete. There's no variations to date. The only risks that we've got on this is once the construction's finished is actually getting the enabling work, which will be done by the appointed contractor, but that could be delayed getting access to water during the summer season, which is quite a major risk for us at this point.
Sorry, I've just seen Sam or Annalisa. You guys wanted to.
You're first, Annalisa.
Were you first, Annalisa? Do you want to
Mine was very quick and very easy. I think the Rolleston Town Centre, the 224 of COVID costs, does that contra out with the comment under project status of the claim being settled, or is that an additional cost to the 224?
No, that's the final cost.
Right.
Yep.
Question just around the town square, and your comment said that a new lead design developer is being considered, and then the comment before that's around cost for professional fees so far. So we're obviously paying someone to do some work. That is this new position, someone to sit on top of all of that, or to replace what's currently being done, and who's responsible for, I guess, what hasn't been done well?
Well, the town centre itself, the design of the actual town centre was completed for the first version of Tiara, or the whole Rolleston Town Centre there. Now we've changed some of the design. We changed the contract for doing Tiara Tia to build the Tiara Tia plus a little bit of the town square for around it. So the whole contract, while it was designed in the first place, needs to be revisited by another designer to actually look at it. So I believe the costs will be on top.
So no other questions at this point.
Okay, solar drying hall, that's progressing. They've actually got contractors on site this month, so we'll finish up with the soil's being stripped and construction will start. So everything up until now has all been in design phase. Health hub, that's progressing as planned. The building, you can see the exterior as being it's nearing completion. So we've got windows going in. There is the only risk with this particular project is effectively the tenants, and getting tenants signed up, which at this stage is looking okay. We've got 2 major tenants signed up, and with a lot of inquiry regarding a lot of the other paramedical type of tenants. So quite confident that we will have tenancies signed up by the time that building's open that are sufficient to actually get us onto where we were supposed to be from the original reports. And the last one is just the Markham Way extension. That's now well underway, and that will start to have construction and civil works costs get added to it from October.
Are there any more questions for Craig? No. So we've got recommendation that we accept the report. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Shane. Second, Sam. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Craig, for that. And now, Calvin, Manager's report.
Yeah, it's table where Chief Executive and in my report. First item within this is a revision of the terms of reference for this committee. So we've discussed this a few times. So the terms of reference are attached. Really just take feedback on that now, and if there's any comments.
Does anyone want to comment on the terms of reference? Annalisa?
Yeah, just a slight tweak. I think it's under 2.1. I think
it's 153.
Yeah, so 2.1, where it says receive regular reports, undertake site visits to satisfy itself that council. I guess it's satisfying. Are we satisfying? I guess it's a scope question. Should that be the Audit and Risk Committee? Because this is the terms of reference for the Audit and Risk Committee. So is that the Audit and Risk Committee clearly understands all aspects of health and safety? Given this is the obligations of the Audit and Risk Committee, not of full council, because I would hope that the full council constitutional mandate or whatever governs the roles and responsibilities of full council would also have a health and safety component in it. But this terms of reference is about the roles and responsibilities of the Audit and Risk Committee. Unless we're going to drag the rest of the members along every time we go on a health and safety visit.
Could it be the Audit and Risk Committee on behalf of council?
I think they can just say the Audit and Risk Committee. So to say receive 2.1, receive regular reports and undertake site visits to satisfy itself that the Audit and Risk Committee clearly understands all aspects of health and safety and compliance.
So, anyone else got any comments on that item?
Okay. We'll move forward then to the Health and Safety and Wellbeing Internal Committee. The purpose of...
So does that mean we accept that? Was that? Oh no, sorry.
No problem. So Health and Safety and Wellbeing Internal Committee, the purpose of this is to raise the profile of health and safety and the appropriateness within the organisation. And this will be a committee that meets internally to ensure the right governance is being applied internally to what we're doing. So the terms of reference for this are also attached to this paper. It will have an obligation to be reporting back to this committee. And key point though, it's not in any way delegating the responsibilities of the council to management, but it's making sure that management are also not delegating away its responsibilities to the health and safety and wellbeing manager. So it's making sure that we're dealing with that. Any comments?
Yeah.
Yep, good. Good terms of reference for the purpose of what this management committee is trying to achieve. The only couple of things I think are missing is, I know as a committee we will receive reports on any incidents, but I'm just wondering whether we need a bullet point in here that talks about the escalation, that if there is an incident, that we're not waiting till 30 days until we have our next committee. So there should be a comment in here that says that immediate or within the time frame, there is escalation from the chief executive to the chair of the audit and risk committee in any serious incident or potential near miss or serious near miss. We shouldn't be waiting for that report in a month's time. So I think we've covered off the reporting, the monthly reporting, with regard to incidents. So it probably just needs a tag online to that saying that within the timeframes of the health and safety, I'm sure there'll be that team's working on the health and safety manual or escalation protocols. The audit risk committee will be notified in a timely manner.
I'm wondering if that is the role of that committee, or if that's the role of the chief executive as the chief executive to be making those comments.
I think it's more just the no surprises approach. So it's probably just it'll probably happen anyway by default. It's that the chief executive is going to let the chair know that a major, like if a fatality happened on site, if I was the chair of the audit and risk committee, I wouldn't want to read about that in a report 30 days after the event. I'd want to know about it. I wouldn't want to read it because I'd be reading it in a newspaper. I wouldn't want to, if I was the chair of the audit and risk committee, I wouldn't want to be reading about it in a newspaper.
Yeah, but even saying that this committee may not convene for that because it'd be a chief executive be dealing with that along with relevant people. You wouldn't necessarily convene this health and safety committee, which is really there as oversight and governance, and would undertake the investigation that went on.
Yeah. So maybe it's not this terms of reference, it's the audit and risk committee.
Yeah.
It belongs somewhere, like it can either be in here or it can be in the audit and risk committee, or it can actually be in a management document. I guess I just want to make sure it's covered somewhere, that if there is a major fatality on site or a serious near miss, the audit and risk committee would find out about it before. So it just needs to be somewhere. It might not need to be in this management. Like the chair of this committee would notify the chair of the audit and risk committee, which happens to be chief executive to chair at the moment. But
You want to add something to that, Sam? Same.
Well, yeah, I guess it probably sits in. It's probably not as basic as the job description of the chief executive, but it's going to be in some management. So we need to find out where it is that we explain it. But I don't think it's here because this committee is only a group of people meeting anyway. So they're receiving reports or discussing things.
yes,
This isn't the emergency. Something's happened and needs to be escalated. So I think it would come through the chief executive to the chair of this group and hopefully to myself and to elected members and yourself on these committees. But I don't know that it's in terms of reference of the committee itself.
So this is a draft. This is the first draft that's come
it belongs in
through.
the,
This is something that can be done and looked at and discussed offline and then come back to.
offline, just a bullet point
But that-
somewhere to make sure that no
Yeah.
surprises.
Because it's a really good point that you raised. It needs to be documented somewhere. And it's just trying to find where is the appropriate space to have that. With the rest of that, what is written for the terms of reference for that Health, Safety and Wellbeing Committee, is there anyone else who's got any other comments on that?
The point to note on this, it's given it's a management terms of reference, it's for information, it's not for approval.
Okay, thanks, Governor. If you want to.
Okay, we'll move on to the Audit New Zealand Management Report. So this report we receive at the end of an audit. It is addressed to the Audit and Risk Committee. From my point of view, it is a relatively clean report with very few matters to be considered. And those matters which are there are of reasonably minor, or not minor, but fairly low significance. So I'll just take any questions on the report as a whole.
Any questions, Annalisa?
I just confer to say, yeah, very clean report, and the items that have been identified are fairly minor. But what is quite pleasing to see is that the issues that have been raised in previous years have been closed out.
So no further questions. We'll move forward to, there's just a couple of training opportunities identified by David within this report around LG Equip, the free digital training, and comment around the Institute of Directors membership. The next, if there's no questions on that, next point is really just an update from myself on where we are with review of reporting. I've undertaken a review of all the various reports that are going on, being delivered internally and to the council. Generally, what I'm finding is that the right data is there, but it's not necessarily as clear and coherent manner as you'd expect. I think that comes from a lot of just presentation of data as opposed to a transformation of information into insight that really gives people confidence and understanding of what's going on. At times, there's varying levels of analysis of what really matters. A lot of reporting on things that don't really matter too much at all. And reports, as Craig had indicated, the reports are pretty repetitive at times, and therefore the size of reports can often lose the important things within them because you spend so much time flicking through pages to see things that aren't there. Steps going forward on this, it will take a bit of time, and I am just raising the fact that with the LTP going on, my team are fairly well embedded and engaged fully on that. So a lot of this will be for my own bat. But wanting to pull together a clear inventory of what reports there are and making sure there's a clear definition of why we have this report and what the purpose of it is for and who the audience is. It could be something internally where we just fail to send a few reports and see what happens at times as well. Want to make sure we've got a clear reporting timetable. And so we're not bombarding people with reports month on month, but really in the right timing for making decisions. And then we get into a rebuild and training and guidance. And I think the guidance is really important, actually understanding how reports are, what they're intending to tell you and how you should read them.
Annalisa, you have a question?
As you can imagine, I'm very excited by that prospect. But at the same time, and when the timing's right, it's not urgent, is also look at maybe the quantum of reporting that's coming up to the Audit and Risk Committee and go back to that terms of reference. Because I must say, in some of the reports that I'm reading, I'm wondering why I'm reading them. And it's all very interesting, but with my pure Audit and Risk Committee hat on, I'm thinking, is this relevant? Does it go back to the terms of reference? Because I think there are some reports in there that are probably really useful, and maybe they could be, if there were committee members that still wanted them and liked them, then maybe they can get them in a different way. But I don't think they're linked to the agenda or the topic of the day. So maybe also when you're looking at the reports, are there any report or content within the report that we don't need as an Audit and Risk Committee? Because it is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Sam?
I think that's a good point around what this committee receives, and Councillor Tier will know that during council meetings often something comes up and the question is, should we give that to the Audit and Risk Committee? And there's been a lot of pushback on that from myself and Murray saying, no, this isn't Audit and Risk material, but it might just be helpful if the other elected members here also, it's not just on Murray and I to always push back, but for you to actually determine and have a good understanding of what the terms of reference are. So when you're having a conversation with someone who might think, give it to Audit and Risk, you can cut it off before it gets to a meeting and is raised to that level.
Any other comments on that? No.
In the last item on this is just a bulletin from the Auditor General. related to assumptions within long-term planning. So that's really just there for your information.
Thank you. So we've got the motions to receive the manager's report for information and recommends to council they adopt the recently revised audit and risk terms of reference. Now we need to make an addition to that. So everyone with the change, included change or something to that effect, which was in 2.1, instead of council having the audit and risk committee as written. Want to mover for that? Sam, second is Shane. All in favour, say aye. Against? Carried. Now we're on to management accountant report. So are you going to
Do that.
take it?
Okay, so the report for the September month, again, it is September and we are in November, so timing is interesting. There's a few key highlights here, just quickly running through them. We're here performing ahead of the budget. Again, growth is a large factor on that. Aquatic Centre, the impacts of COVID, as you expect around numbers and behaviours of customers. Resource consents, again, received 814 of these and issued 720. There's building consents, and resource consents, a large number as well, 97% of those within the time frame. NZTA maintenance and renewal expenditure is forecast to be within budget, with forecast overspend related to the capital projects. The Five Waters expenditure, a lot of reactive maintenance within there and our monitoring program causing the pressure on the budgets there. And capital expenditure is slightly behind budget. It's really relating to the timing of spend at this point. So not looking at that going now to be under budget at this point, but we're monitoring it closely. Other than that, I'll just take questions on any content from within the report.
Anyone got any questions, or do I want to step through the report and go through quickly?
Yeah, just quick one from me. So the just going back to that point of when you get a chance to review all the reporting and what we're getting and whether we actually need it. So an example of why, when I was reading this, going, what am I reading and why am I reading this, is page 208. So it's KPIs from our major contractors. But we kind of we sort of finish a subsection of the reporting pack, which is all the financials for each internal service offering, which is great. That's all very useful. But then when I get to this major contract operational KPI monthly scores, I can't really read it and I don't really know what it's telling me. But this is just one example. Is it useful information? Do I need it? If it is useful and I need it, then it probably needs to be a little bit clearer, because I don't know what those scores mean. They're sort of like, it might sound a bit harsh, but it looks like dots on a page to me that I don't know what it means. If I don't need it, it's not useful, then get rid of it. So that's just one example of, don't just keep putting in the same material each month because we've always had it.
David, did you want to?
Yeah, so look, through you, Madam Chair, the pages 208 and 209, they are the management, as you were, the performance of our independent contractors against the KPIs we've got there. And they were specifically requested by councillors just so they know that not only are the KPIs being met, but more importantly, in instances where they are not being met, what corrective action we are taking.
Suggestion on this would be that we would have a dashboard with in compliance, out of compliance, and of out of compliance, what the reason is for it. But I take your point. There are some innocuous comments within it. See, at one point there's a roller disco I'd recommence. So
yeah.
Did you want to make another comment? No. They go through the pages. So 189, no comments. 190, 191, just call out if you wanted to say anything. 192, 193.
I'm on a roll here, but I will stop, I promise. Again,
No, it's fine.
the limbs are really useful information. And I imagine that full council and the subcommittee would find this really, useful information, telling us about the progress of happening, But there's a lot of information here, and I think for me the most telling is actually the first table that hits us, which is number of limbs issued and average processing days of 7. But again, I don't know, as a new person coming out, is 7 good? Is it not good? What's our KPI? What's our target? Are we behind schedule, ahead of schedule?
There's a 10-day statutory requirement on each one of those.
Yeah. That was page 211.
The really interesting thing is the numbers continues to grow, and
I know.
it's indicating that the number of houses which are changing hands.
Which obviously affects our balance sheet as what's coming in and what's going out, whether we're against our forecast.
Yeah, it's a very positive telling story, isn't it? But it might, again, just from a reporting perspective, because I think we go back for 2 or 3 years. I mean, other members might find the 3-year history is good, but at some point we probably need to actually go, maybe just 2 years is enough. Just so this reporting back doesn't get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to be looking at things like that as well. And unfortunately, Tim's not here at the moment, which is his department, but certainly something that we need to discuss, looking at the bigger picture of what's getting reported. And so pages I've got one.
Yeah, just on that same point around the limbs, because I think the information, it's who needs to see the information as well. Yeah. So here, the average processing days is probably a key thing for the auditors to know, but actually the graph that shows year on year over the last 5 years is really good for councillors to know. And so do you want to create 2 separate reports for the two? This is the question, Kelvin, around what you're going to end up presenting, or do you just have the one report that you just move on twice? But a note within it might be helpful. But the graph piece to me is helpful for councillors, look year on year data, but it's information rather than critical analysis of risks or audit today.
Is there a comment you want to make to that? Or?
No, I just completely agree. It's like I said, a place with a nice clear dashboard which gives you all the information on the page for those key metrics.
So 194, 195, 196, 197, 198, 199, 200, 201, 202, 203, 204, 205, 206, 207. We've talked about 208, 209. Anyone want to add anything to that? No. 210, 211, 212. We've got 213, which is the Environmental Services report. Anything out of that? Anyone wants to comment? Sam?
216. Let's get that. Sorry, I did not mean to rush ahead.
No. That's good.
Just average number of processing days, and this might be for you, David, Chief Executive. We're nearing 20 is the statutory limit, and again, maybe making that clear within the report, Annalisa, for those that are just looking at the table, it's not clear that there is, you wouldn't even know that there's a limit that we're supposed to not breach. But David, we've been tracking up from 14 this year pretty dramatically, and there's been an increase in building consents come through, and we know that. Have you got some strategies in place to be able to keep us below 20 and to bring it back down? It was more comfortable at 14 to 16 than it is in the 18 to 20 bracket.
Through you, Madam Chair, look, it is something that we are aware of. It's one of these, in a macabre sort of way, almost good problems to have, because it has been caused by the significant increase that we've had in consent applications. We've done 290, as you're aware, in a couple of months, which is the all-time world record for Selwyn. We have at least 4, if not 5, different councils providing us with assistance at the moment, and we're also on a recruitment drive at the moment to boost our staff numbers. You'll recall when we adopted our annual plan this year, we were expecting a downturn, and of course everything's gone the other way. But I'm confident that we're heading in the right direction. I'm more confident that we are below the 20 days. I again accept 12 to 14 for me would be the ultimate that we're aiming for.
Thank you. And so basically done that report as a whole. Is there any other comments for the end of the report? So we've got a recommendation that we set the report for the period ending 30 September 2020 for information. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Bob. Seconder, Annalise. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Anyone against? No. So carried. So the next report, Calvin, is the cash flow and borrowing policy monitoring report.
Again, not much to comment on here. The key points are that we're within all our metrics within our policy, so there's nothing we're outside of. We are beginning to take some borrowing. There's 15 million borrowed between outside of this reporting period, but it's in that October period. It's just a reflection of the spend going on around capital projects. As you're well aware, we've got plenty of builds on and they will require debt. The interesting point is interest rates continue to be very low. No signs whatsoever of that relaxing. The question for us will be thinking about what sort of tenure we start taking on our debt as we require borrowing and the ability to push this a little bit harder and a bit longer. So speaking to Murray last night about that, I think we'll come back with a strategy paper on that in the near future.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on that report?
Yeah, just the staging of paying back these loans. Are you happy with the way that they're going to have to be paid back in the future and the timing of that?
Yes, at this point, but of course, quite often there's you're refinancing at that point and reborrowing. So yeah, there'll be a program set up to look at that, especially as we start to invest a lot more in these capital builds and have a much bigger debt book. But we're fortunate at the moment to have a very, very healthy balance sheet.
Other questions? So if recommendation is that we receive the report is at 30 September for information. Do I have a mover? Sam, seconder. I'll second it myself. All in favour, say aye. Any against? Carried. So that is the end of the public part of the meeting. So if I can have a mover to move into public excluded. Do I have a mover? Sam and the seconder. I'll second that too. And all in favour, say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.